Reformed Faces Session 6. This session deals with a particular hymnal, namely the Hymns of Universal Praise, 普天颂赞. What kind of hymnal is this Hymns of Universal Praise? I heard that it has something to do with Presbyterian churches. At least many Presbyterian churches, such as the Church of Christ in China, use this hymnal. Well, we need to go back into history again. Remember, first of all, that Presbyterian, Congregational, and Reformed missionaries cooperated when they started churches in Fujian, in Xiamen. And they cooperated even with Methodists in the formation of the Church of Christ in China. Well, the Presbyterians and the Congregationals and the Reformed missionaries cooperate in many other areas as well, such as in the building up of Christian colleges or universities, schools, hospitals, and publishing houses. In the area of publishing, we note something called the Society for the Diffusion of Knowledge, SDK. That its Chinese name is 广学会. In 1895 or so, 广学会 asked a Welsh Baptist missionary to head up the work. His name is Timothy Richard. And for 3 months, Timothy Richard engaged an assistant by the name of Liang Qicao. Now, why did I mention the Society for the Diffusion of Knowledge, 广学会? Because today, the descendant of 广学会 is the Chinese Christian Literature Council, 基督教文艺出版社 of Hong Kong. And it is the Chinese Christian Literature Council that publishes the Hymns of Universal Praise. The Hymns of Universal Praise was first published in 1936, and then it had a second edition roughly 1978, with English edition and then bilingual edition following, and finally a third edition 2006. So we note the beginning of Presbyterian, Congregationalist, and Reformed cooperation in churches and publishing in colleges and so on. Number 2. Now let's take a look at how they cooperated at the university level, because it has something to do directly with Hymns of Universal Praise. The name of the university, Yanjing University, Yanjing 大学, organized in 1916 because several of these Presbyterian and other colleges, men's colleges and so on, came together and wanted to start a university. And they asked a missionary, a Southern Presbyterian, PCUS, a New Testament scholar by the name of John Leighton Stewart, to be its first president, 使徒雷登. Now, some of us have heard of the name John Leighton Stewart because later on in 1946, he finally gave up this presidency of Yanjing University and became the U.S. ambassador to China. So Yanjing asked John Leighton Stewart because he represented the Presbyterian Church in the U.S., which was not a sponsoring denomination among the other schools that formed Yanjing. He was an outsider, in other words. Well, John Leighton Stewart had an eye on a young Christian very early on by the name of Liu Ting Fang, Timothy Ting Fang Liu, L-E-W. He sponsored Liu Ting Fang to attend school in the U.S. Well, first of all, in St. John's University, then University of Georgia, and finally Liu Ting Fang graduated both from Union Theological Seminary in New York and Columbia University as well with a PhD. And in 1920, Liu Ting Fang returned to China and simultaneously was invited by 3 universities to be professor, namely Yanjing University, and then Beijing Normal University, Beijing 师范大学, and Yanjing 大学. So the government school, the government education college, as well as the Christian university. In 1926, Zhao Zichen, T.C. Zhao, C-H-A-O, was invited to join Beijing's faculty from Suzhou, Suzhou University, Dongwu 大学. And so Liu Tingfang and T.C. Zhao, Zhao Zichen, together worked on the writing, the translation of hymns, particularly for Yanjing Christian Fellowship, a group that met on Friday nights at Yanjing University. In 1932, they published 20 Sugar Fellowship hymns. Immediately sold out the 2,000 copies. 1933, second edition immediately sold out the 2,500 copies. In the fellowship hymns, there were 120 hymns translated by T.C. Zhao. 1936, finally, Hymns of Universal Praise was published. Timothy Tingfang Liu was the editor. Actually, he was in charge of the lyrics, with great help, of course, from T.C. Zhao. But what about the melodies? Well, it is very interesting, as I was saying, that Presbyterians, including Reformed and Congregationalists, worked very closely with Methodists. Here's a Methodist for you. His name is Bliss Wyant, W-I-A-N-T. His Chinese name, Fan Tianxiang, 1895 to 1975. Well, Fan Tianxiang was a professor of music, and he was in charge of the music, the tunes, for Hymns of Universal Praise. Bliss Wyant graduated from Ohio Wesleyan University in 1920, but during his college days, he met he became friends with Hong Ye, who later taught at Yanjing School of Religion. Of course, Hong Ye had a lot to do with inviting Bliss Wyant to Beijing. 1923, Wyant graduated from Boston University School of Theology, Methodist, was ordained and went to China after 1 year of language study. In 1924, Bliss Wyant joined the Faculty of Theology, later on named the Faculty of Religion at Yanjing University, and he established the Department of Music. He worked very closely with T.C. Zhao, who translated all these lyrics. And in 1936, Hymns of Universal Praise was published. He was actually in Boston at that time and went to Boston University again and got an M.A. in music and taught music, both in Union Seminary in New York and in Nashville, Tennessee. In 1946, he received his PhD from Vanderbilt University. His dissertation was called The Music of China. He went back to China 1947, 1952. The interesting part was that in 1963, he went back to Hong Kong. Now, this time, he translated the lyrics of those hymns written by Chinese authors. He translated these indigenous Chinese texts into English, and that's how you get the English edition of Hymns of Universal Praise, and finally the bilingual version. So you see, you have Liu Tingfang, really fruit of China Indian mission, and then it sponsored by a Southern Presbyterian missionary to go to these interdenominational schools, Presbyterian, Union Seminary, and came back to China. Zhao Zichen, a Methodist, Bliss Wyant, a Methodist as well, working together to edit this hymnal. My wife had a professor at Nyack College, Dr. Sheng, S-H-E-N-G, who I believe graduated from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary way back in the 1970s, early 1970s, and he wrote his PhD in music on how the Hymns of Universal Praise, the lyrics showed a lot of influence from Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Into the 1970s, the second edition of Hymns of Universal Praise was published. Interestingly, Hayward Wang Yongxi 先生 invited Philip Teng, Teng Jinhui 牧师 of the Christian Missionary Alliance to edit the second edition of Hymns of Universal Praise. Now, interestingly, Reverend Teng Jinhui 牧师 Teng, hails from the Shandong Presbyterian Church. He went to Scotland, to Edinburgh in 1947 to attend seminary there. He preserved his faith by attending a very godly, a very small independent church. And so the mainstream Chinese Christian Literature Council invited this Christian and Mission Alliance pastor, Teng Jinhui, to be the editor. And so you see the, if I might say, the more conservative evangelical influence in the second edition of Hymns of Universal Praise. Third edition, 2006. You can see that it is the third edition because the cover is very light, bright green, whereas the second edition is dark green. In this edition, the editor-in-chief states in the preface that she wants to eliminate all of the melodies and lyrics that have anything to do, any trace of romanticism from the hymnal, much to the chagrin of many Christians who have come to love these gospel songs. And so the Hymns of Universal Praise, third edition, is quite different from the second edition. In any case, the Hymns of Universal Praise, even though they contain certain hymns that we might label liberal or social gospel, nevertheless, is a landmark in the history of hymnals, particularly its first edition. And it is the reference point for many of the other hymnals, such as the Baptist hymnal, New Songs of Praise, 颂主新歌, Hymns of Light, 生命圣诗, and many others. They all go back to Hymns of Universal Praise because it shows deep scholarship in the history of the lyrics, history of the tunes. So you do need to know about Hymns of Universal Praise, no matter what your preference is in your choice of hymnal, or maybe you don't prefer to use a hymnal at all.